Why are you running for Lucas County Sheriff, and what are you hoping to accomplish?
Well, I'm running for Lucas County Sheriff simply because I am a community-oriented person. I think that the Lucas County Sheriff's office is also a community organization. And I believe that we can do a lot of good within that organization and within the county itself with some of the programs that I can offer to employees and to the county as a whole. So that is one of the reasons why I'm running. And the second reason why I'm running is because my wife said I can.
If you become Lucas County Sheriff, what are your top priorities?
Well, top priorities, the first top priority would be to address any personnel issues we have. Because as you may know, you can't not run an organization successfully without good trained employees. So one of my priorities is to address any personnel issues that we may have to help bring the morale up in that organization, to help offer and provide additional training and reinforcement of training within that organization. So that's the first priority. We always talk about the jail. That's been a big topic for the last few years. And one of the things that I am good at is bringing people together. I love coalitions. And so although the voters have voted to keep the jail downtown, we're going to relook at that. We're going to bring a coalition together of people from around the county and law enforcement agencies from around the county. And we're going to discuss where that jail should be. Should it stay downtown or should we move it? And then after we get the consensus where a jail should be, we're going to work on reconstruction or building a new jail somewhere place. And like I said, it could be downtown or it could be somewhere else. It's going to be up to the coalition that we put together. That's one of the priorities. The other priorities as a sheriff is to make sure every aspect of that sheriff department, all the responsibilities are being done in a proper way. I'm going to build off of what's been done already under Sheriff Tharp and make sure we offer the kinds of services and protection services that a sheriff should be offering. As you may know, the sheriff is the top law enforcement officer in a county. So we are going to portray that. We are going to be that top law enforcement officer in the county. And we're going to look at other aspects. We're going to look at training, for example. We're going to make sure that we are offering the kinds of training and the reinforcement of training that comes from OPATA, which is the Ohio Peace Officer Training Commission that's ran under the state attorney general's office. And as you may know, that's where all police officers get their commission and power from. We're going to make sure that training is reinforced, and I am a big one on training. We're going to make sure that our county taxpayers, that our county citizens have input into the sheriff department. I believe wholeheartedly anything that affects you, you should have input in the guidance of that agency. So those are some of the things we're going to look at and do it. And we're going to look at the budget. Obviously, we have some budget issues. We're going to look at where we can trim the budget. We're going to look at where we can move things around to do things a little bit better than what's being already done. And so those are some of the top priorities as a sheriff.
Do you believe in general that police reform is needed?
I do believe police reform is needed, criminal justice reform. And if you know a little bit about that, that reform is looking at how we house people in the jail, how people are booked in the jail, and to look at those things that are not that serious. Why do we need to then have people put up bonds and stay overnight or over the weekend in jail when they're not even found guilty yet, unless it's a serious crime? We're looking at better management of jail, better management of prisoners, to make sure that those prisoners, once they return or before they return to society, that they are trained and that we are releasing those people that that would be a productive citizen within society. So I believe wholeheartedly in criminal justice reform.
How do you plan to improve community relations with the sheriff's office? Because community relations are a large part of what establishes respect between the community and the sheriff's office.
Absolutely, that's a good question, and I plan to do that by a two-phase. First, looking at again how we train police officers, how we reinforce that training with police officers. I may not be able to legislate what's in one's heart, but I can sure be able to legislate behavior. So we're going to look at that. We're going to look at supervision, because some of the things that we see that's happening and with poor police community relations is the way that those officers are supervised or not supervised out in the field. So we're going to look at supervision. We're going to look at also the officers themselves, because as you know, Jaden, officers move from one call to the next call. Sometimes they have to be psychology in problems, within the home. They have to look at domestic violences that are happening. They respond to all kinds of crimes out there. And so how do we really care for those officers that are involved in that day in and day out? So we're looking at part of that reform too, which would also be included under justice reform, is looking at the psychological state of an officer, is to make sure that we provide those mental health assessments that officers need, and make sure that once an officer hit the street, that we do those mental assessments at least once a year. And we're looking at, again, when I look at things that's happening around the country involving an officer's misconduct, I look at who made an atmosphere so comfortable that an officer can do the things that we see some of them do, within our society, within our community. That means there's a failure in supervision. So we need to look at supervision. We need to make sure we have the right kinds of supervisors that are committed to community service out there in our community. And one of the things I always talk with new cadets is that we are nothing but public servants, and we have to act like public servants, and we have to get away from we against you. So that's one of the things or reforms I'll look on the police side. On the community side, communities sometimes need to look in the mirror, as I say a lot. We need to make sure as a citizen that we're doing the right things with our police officers when we are approached by our police officers. We need to make sure that we are respectful. The biggest thing I talked about is also, we're talking about defunding the police, as you know, and that can't happen. There may be some things that we can move around to take out of police hands. And for example, one of those things talk about resource officers in the schools. And you probably have never witnessed this, but I've witnessed, and most of us that are older have never had resource officers in our school. And so we have to look at why is that? I think there's a breakdown in the discipline in the family. I think there's a breakdown in the discipline in schools. And so we're going to look at all of that and bringing discipline back to both the family and the schools to then help better our police department and our community police relations.
Many protesters, they believe that the idea of defund the police is demilitarization of the police or the sheriff's office. They believe that some resources these law enforcement agencies shouldn't have. That means having military style uniforms and military gear. Do you really believe that the sheriff's office or police departments need that kind of gear?
Well, I only believe they need that kind of gear in specific situations. For example, when they're going to execute a search warrant at a very dangerous raid involving drugs and those kinds of things. I believe that they need that kind of equipment if they're addressing terrorism in our community, and so I do not believe that kind of equipment should be normal equipment that police officers wear throughout our community, that they ride in throughout our community. I think police officers should look normal. They should look as close to community as possible, with a uniform that would let people know that they are police. So I don't believe in militarizing the police department just for normal police operations.
So Officer Anthony Dia was shot and killed by an intoxicated man. So do you believe that officers need more protection when they are out in the field, or sheriff's deputy?
Well, I'll tell you this, just being a police officer myself and being in similar situations, and thank God I never lost my life. Police officers always need additional protection. And that additional protection, and you will hear me throughout this interview talk about training. That additional protection lends towards training. How do we train our officers? How do we give our officers street survival skills so that we don't find ourselves in situations like Officer Dia had found himself in a tragic situation? Again, we need to learn how to deal with all kinds of situations, and we need to make sure that we have seasoned trained officers out there that are addressing community needs. It's just tragic to lose an officer, and that let us know as the public how dangerous a police officer's job is. You know, to walk up on the scene, to have something like that happen to you, to leave your home on your shift, and you never know if you're going to return home. So I do believe that police officers need additional protection, but that additional protection has to involve additional training as well.
What do you want voters to know about you and about your campaign and what you're going to do as sheriff?
Well, what I would like voters to know about me is that I'm a community person. If you look at all that I've done in the community, in Jaden, you know a little bit about the Toledo Buffalo Soldiers and what we have done in the community. I think we should, as a sheriff, we should care about that community. We should care about every residence throughout the county that have problems feeding their children, that have problems, obtaining a job that can sustain them as parents. I think we should look at our schools, which I'll be looking at as Buffalo Soldiers. You know, we've adopted two of our schools here in the Toledo area, which is LP Stewart Academy for Girls and Martin Luther King Academy for Boys, and we do a lot of work with those young people. I think as a sheriff, we should continue that. One of the things that I'll follow Sheriff Tharp on, and he's adopted LP Stewart Academy for Girls, and that's why the Buffalo Soldiers are there, because he asked us to then interact with those kids. So as a sheriff, I'll be interacting with our kids. I'll be interacting with other community organizations to help enhance the quality of life throughout our whole community. As a sheriff, I will be interacting with other law enforcement agencies throughout the county. As you have heard, I'm sure that our governor is looking at providing additional funds for training. And again, as I talk about this, I have to always mention training. And I think the sheriff office should be the top law enforcement agency within that county to provide that training throughout the whole county for our officers. So I'm going to look at that. And again, I'm going to look at community service. And as I said earlier, police officers are community servants, and we need to get back to being community servants and not have we against you kinds of attitudes out there. And that's what we plan to do.
Lucas County Sheriff candidate Earl Mack, thanks for joining me.
You're welcome, and thank you for having me.